Whether you're building a new home or adding on, framing up the situation, or putting a roof over your head, if you need to rock it, roll it, or just get on with it, HOMETIME has a video to help you do it right. Transform your small bathroom into a luxurious master bath, or increase your home's value by updating your old kitchen. Keep your drains draining, your switches switching, and your footing firm. Whether you do it yourself or buy it yourself, HOMETIME's how-to video guides will help you get the results you want. Will make your next project a success. See your local home improvement retailer for the HOMETIME video that's right for you. Hi, welcome to HOMETIME. I'm Dean Johnson.
And I'm Robin Hartle.
We're going to be remodeling this kitchen. Now that means replacing all the cabinets, countertops, fixtures, and appliances. We'll show you the basic how-to steps for that, as well as give you an idea of how to facelift your old cabinets with new drawers, doors, and face frames.
We're just about ready to start tearing out the old kitchen here, but we'll first give you a sense of kitchen design elements, basic materials, budgeting, and scheduling.
HOMETIME is made possible by Chevy full-size pickup, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickup on the road. The national PBS series HOMETIME is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley has been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right. At HOMETIME, we believe the best way to get the job done is to use the finest tools.
And this Chevy full-size pickup is one of our favorites. Equipped with an optional Vortec 5700 V8 engine, it generates 255 horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque to power you through the toughest jobs.
And with the optional third door, you've got lots of room for all your other tools.
And friends to help you use them.
At home or on the job site.
For work or play,
it's no wonder we at HOMETIME count on Chevy full-size pickups.
The most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
As with any how-to project, it's critical to have a good working plan when you're remodeling a kitchen. Something that shows you exactly where the new cabinets and appliances should be installed to give you the most efficient food storage, preparation, and cleanup with the smoothest traffic flow.
That's where you need to think in terms of an efficient work triangle, which basically positions the refrigerator, the stove, and the sink so that walking between them, you'd follow a triangle. That's the most efficient placement for a single cook. And if there's two of you, you can still move from one position to another without running into the other person. Here's what the triangle looks like in a U-shaped kitchen, which is one of the more common kitchen design possibilities. Another is the L-shaped kitchen. And you can see the triangle there is a bit strained, but still workable. In the galley kitchen, the triangle's defined a bit better, but cross traffic often makes this layout less desirable.
When you add a kitchen island to the design, then you go beyond the work triangle and create multiple work centers, especially if you move the sink or cooktop to the island and add a microwave to the perimeter layout. That gives two or more cooks plenty of room to operate and a wider choice of workstations. And that's a route we're going with this kitchen. You can get help with kitchen planning from cabinet distributors like we did, since the cabinet layout is the main part of a kitchen design. But on larger projects where you're adding on or bumping out, you might want to call on a certified remodeling contractor or kitchen designer for help.
What you can or can't afford is always going to be the real gating item in your kitchen planning process. And that's always the bottom line, isn't it? For this project, we're running right down the middle of the road on what we're spending in the 5 main categories. And here's a quick look at the early estimates to give you a sense of that. The cabinets you'll be seeing later do make up well over 60% of our projected costs, coming in at $10,100. The countertops, if we had them made, would run about $500, but we'll save more than half of that doing it ourselves. The flooring runs about $1,200. That's with us installing it, though. Labor would be more. The plumbing fixtures total $1,120, and the appliances are running $2,830. Add it all up, and you get $15,750, which should give you a sense of where we're coming from on this project. That figure could be a bit misleading, though, since it does not include any cost for labor, demolition, reframing, the $400 window we're putting in, or the rough ends. So the total cost to contract a kitchen project like this could run you up to $30,000 or more.
Well, the last thing we want to talk about in the planning process is the overall problem of project management. If you hire a contractor, that's what you'll be paying them for. But if you do it yourself, there's a few basics to keep in mind. First, get together with your local building officials early in the planning process to find out what codes impact your project and what permit and inspections routine you must follow. You'll have to provide them a plan, and if you're adding or rerouting plumbing, electrical, or heating lines, you'll have to allow for inspections. And in some areas, you may be required to hire licensed contractors to deal with specific parts of the job. So find out as soon as possible. Then when you're ready to get started, make sure you've figured out how to deal with debris, possibly by renting a dumpster. How to store new materials till you actually need them, like in a basement or a garage, and most importantly, how to deal with the lack of a kitchen for most of the project.
Here you go.
Okay.
There's actually quite a bit of work involved in getting the kitchen ready for a remodel. We've already cleared out all the food and dishes from the cabinet and moved them downstairs where we set up a temporary kitchen. Right now I'm just getting this light out of the way so nobody hits their head.
Now if you've ever been through one of these, you realize that demolishing a kitchen is basically the reverse of putting it together. So first we'll take out the appliances, and we'll haul out the plumbing, then take out the countertops, then the cabinetry.
For the big appliances like the refrigerator, we rented a furniture dolly to save our backs, and later we'll protect our eyes, ears, and lungs as needed during the demolition, something everyone should remember on their do-it-yourself projects.
If you have to take out a dishwasher, first disconnect the unit's water and drain lines through the front access panel and unscrew the brackets securing it to the bottom of the countertop. Then it should pull out fairly easily.
To get the sink out, first undo the sink trap compression fittings and remove the pieces. Just have a bucket ready to catch the standing water in the trap. Then you can get at the supply lines more easily to cut them like this if they're soldered, or unscrew them if they're connected to shutoff valves with compression fittings.
Once the pipes are disconnected, you can pull the sink and faucet out as a single unit. If it sticks, check for clips underneath and undo those, or use a pry bar along the edge if it's glued or caulked down.
After the sink's gone, sweat on a couple of caps if you cut the copper supply pipes like we did, so you can turn the water back on without flooding the kitchen.
Once the fixtures are gone, you can pull out the old countertops. Newer tops will be secured from below, so remove the screws first. Older ones will be glued or nailed down, but you can pry them up to remove them.
Then, with the tops off, you can deal with the base cabinets. Older cabinets were often built in place so you can take those out all at once or piece by piece. Modular units will be screwed or nailed to the wall and to each other, so remove the fasteners first.
With wall cabinets, it's basically the same procedure as the base cabinets, but if there's a soffit, check for extra screws or nails going up into the soffit framing, sometimes hard to see.
To remove the soffit, first pull off the drywall or plaster and then take out the framing. On this project, the soffits were bolstered with 3/4-inch plywood, so the simplest technique was to loosen them with a sledgehammer and pry them free. Just make sure the water and electricity is off in case utilities are running through the soffit.
In a lot of kitchen projects, you move right into the cabinet installation from here. But we're going to enlarge the kitchen window, so that means taking out the window trim, some of the drywall, and some of the siding outside. That's so we can get the old window out and reframe the opening for the new windows.
But now that we pulled the drywall off, you can see how the window opening was framed. You've got the header, the trimmer studs, the king studs, the sill, and the cripples down here below. Now before we pull out the old window, we cut and laid out the framing for the new window. The trimmer and kings are the same size, but the sill and the header are going to be much longer because the new window is wider.
First, pull out the old window after removing the fasteners holding it in place. Then clear the space needed for the new framing. In most cases, you'll want to set up a temporary brace to support the ceiling till the new framing's in.
Since we had our new framing all set to go, we skipped the bracing and put the new framing in immediately. We centered the new rough opening 69 inches from the corner. We got that length by determining the center point for the new window on the plan.
Once the new opening's framed, you can cut away the old sheathing outside to finish it off.
Well, we've been talking about our new window in the singular, but it's actually two casement windows, identical in size, with left and right swings that open from the center. The frame is a low-maintenance vinyl, which is insulated. The sashes are double-pane, low-E glazing with argon gas, which basically means that they have tons more insulating value than their predecessors and much more resistance to condensation.
Once the openings are ready, set the window in place, center it in the opening, level it, and nail it into the framing.
If you have to reroute the drain and vent, determine which stud space works best and drill down through the bottom plate there. Then redirect the drain up through the new hole. And you may have to cut some of its horizontal run and glue it back together like we did, or you may have to extend it with a length of pipe.
For the vent, drill up through the top plate and the roof directly above the hole for the new drain run, and run a length of pipe down through the hole in the roof and the top plate.
Glue that to the drain pipe with a fitting that works best for your setup. We used a sanitary T-fitting we had secured to the top of the drain pipe. You'll also need to extend the drain to where it will stub out of the wall. Double check your pipe sizes with your local inspectors. Turns out we had made one mistake.
Well, during our plumbing inspection, the inspector told us he wanted to see a 2-inch pipe coming out through the roof. So we did is went down to the kitchen, we cut off the old 1.5-inch pipe, installed an 1.5-inch to 2-inch bushing, glued on the new 2-inch pipe, cut a larger hole in the roof, brought that up. Now I'm just putting the boot back on the top of it. So it just shows you that when you think you're on top of it, there's a few things you're bound to miss from time to time.
Well, we're starting the electrical rough-in. And the most efficient plan is to mark where the boxes go, nail those in, drill the holes for the cable, and run those. Right now we're in the box nailing stage.
As with plumbing, every project's going to be a little different depending on how you're expanding and what you already have to work with. For instance, some of these boxes will work just fine. In fact, we even have 2 20-amp circuits that will satisfy our code requirement for countertop outlets.
To run the cable to the new boxes, drill holes through the studs above or below the boxes, and keep the holes relatively level so it's easier to pull the cable through.
Now we're using non-metallic sheathed cable to extend the power from our circuits up here. The reason we're using this is it's become standard over the years and is replacing the metal conduit that was used when this house was originally built. Now this stuff is pretty easy to run. We just thread it through the holes. You start down at the main panel and then work your way up to the devices. Or you could also start from the device and work your way back to the main panels. It really doesn't make any difference. Of course, that's for new circuits. We're just extending these from the existing circuits, so it makes it a lot easier. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to leave a nice long loop here so we can tie into this one down the road.
You may not have access to open framing, so we'll show you how to retrofit electrical boxes in existing walls. First, you trace the outline of the box you want to install on the wall surface, making sure you're between the studs, not over one.
Next, you cut the hole for the box along those lines. I'm using a keyhole saw for this.
Assuming you've got access from the basement, drill a hole up through the subfloor and the bottom plate directly below the location of your new box. To be sure, measure the box location from a perimeter wall upstairs and drill at the same point downstairs.
Now reel out a fish tape till you hit the bottom plate. Fish around till you feel the hole, and then poke the tape through the hole. It helps to have a partner below.
Up there, Robin.
Attach one end of your new cable to the end of the fish tape. The other end goes to the power source.
Then wind up the fish tape, pulling the cable through the plate, the stud cavity, and the hole you cut. To finish the job, detach the cable from the fish tape, run it through the back of your retrofit box, and secure the box in the opening. The easiest one for do-it-yourselfers seems to be the one with the flanges that secure the box by tightening against the back of the wall surface when you screw it into the back.
That should give you a basic sense of how to extend electrical service in a kitchen remodel. But after going as far as we could, we had our electrical contractor check over our work and upgrade our service to provide for the new circuits we needed.
Then after the framing, plumbing, and electrical inspections, we foamed in all the new cables and pipes, and we insulated the exterior wall and covered that with a new vapor barrier.
In our area, we also have to get any new insulation inspected. But once that was done, we covered the exposed framing with new drywall and patched in the other damaged or missing areas.
We then sealed up the drywall joints with joint compound and joint tape. We covered the screw heads with a joint compound to hide those. We followed that with 2 more coats to finish the walls.
If you need to frame a new kitchen soffit, you basically build a box along the ceiling as Dean and Suzanne Egley did in an earlier kitchen project. They first secured 2x2 nailers to the wall and ceiling to establish the soffit's height and depth. They secured the framing for the side to that and to the nailer on the ceiling. And they screwed in blocking between the bottom pieces to firm it all up and finish the basic framing.
Well, it's been about a week of drywall and painting, which is pretty typical because of all the dry times. Now, we're ready to put in the cabinets. Now, it's a real good idea to remove all the drawers and doors ahead of time so you don't have to worry about dinging anything up.
The first step here is laying out plumb and level reference lines based on existing conditions. Now, you start by finding the highest point on the floor and then measuring up from there and marking what would be the top of the base cabinets and the bottom of the wall cabinets. Otherwise, it'd be hard to keep your cabinets level.
If the levels bubble tips one way, move it in that direction till it levels off or you reach the end of your run. That's the high point. From there, first measure up 34.5 inches for the top of the base cabinets and then 54 inches for the bottom of the wall cabinets. Mark level lines through both those points to serve as guidelines. It's also a good idea to mark the wall stud locations for securing the cabinets. And securing a temporary ledger board along the wall cabinet guideline makes it a lot easier to put those in.
Generally, you put the corner cabinet in first, and we drilled a hole for the lighting drop and threaded the cable through that first. Then we set it in place, resting it on the ledger board, shimmed the back to plumb the sides, and secured it to the framing through the hanging rails on the back of the cabinet. We pre-drilled the cabinet backs at the studs and drove in 2.5-inch panhead screws provided by the manufacturer.
Once the corner's set and secure, you can set the second one against it, lining up the edges where they meet and clamping them together. It's best to secure the frames under the hinges so the hinge hides the screw top. Then you can screw in the back of the second unit, but shim the back first if there's a gap between the wall and the cabinet. Otherwise, you might rack the box and mess up the doors. So that gives you the basic steps for securing framed cabinets.
With frameless cabinets, there are no face frames, so you pre-drill through the sides of the cabinets and use special nuts and bolts supplied by the cabinet makers to secure the sides. And those usually come with special covers to hide the hardware. Otherwise, installation is pretty much the same as with frame cabinets.
The next couple of cabinets went in pretty much the same way, including the 12-inch high unit that'll support the microwave shelf, and the small unit that went between the window and the corner cabinet.
All right, here's the plan that we worked out with the distributor and what we ordered our cabinets from. We also use this to keep track of the units on site, what goes where, stuff like that. So this is obviously a key document for us. Now this is the run of wall cabinets that we just put in. We left a gap over here for a 7-foot utility cabinet that we're going to put in later. Right now we're going to put in these base cabinets.
As with wall cabinets, you typically start with the corner unit, but ours had a rounded back to accommodate a couple of Lazy Susan shelves inside, so we couldn't line that up in the corner. So we first secured the face frame of the corner cabinet to the base units on the right and left, forming kind of a monster corner unit. Then we pushed that into place and lined everything up at once. Notice we also secured some 1x2 blocking along the base cabinet guideline to support the corner of our countertops. We then screwed through the hanging rails on the side units into the wall studs to secure the whole thing to the walls.
Once the corner units were secured, we went ahead and set the final base unit on the right side, lining that up under the microwave cabinet above. The sink base cabinet was next, and that typically requires a lot of holes for plumbing and electrical connections. To determine where the openings go, you just measure coordinates for each hole from reference points like the edge of the neighboring cabinet and the reference lines drawn on the wall. For the outlet, we measure to each of the 4 corners. Then we transfer those measurements to the cabinet, using the corresponding edges of the cabinet to match the references on the wall, and taking care to accommodate any offsets needed for reveals or for the thickness of the cabinet sides or back. For smaller items like pipes and drains, we just measure to the center from 2 directions to determine the position.
You can drill out holes for supply, drain, or vent pipe using spade bits or hole saws just a little bit larger than the pipes themselves. For electrical boxes, you can first drill the 4 corners and then use a jigsaw, reciprocating saw, or a keyhole saw to finish the cuts. One problem was that the water supply line stub-outs weren't high enough above the floor of the cabinet to attach the shut-off valves, so we had to extend those each a few inches with new copper before we could finally set the sink base in place and secure it.
We left a 24-inch space for the new dishwasher between the sink base and the final base cabinet, which we lined up with marks we made along the reference line. We shimmed the front of the cabinet level, and we made sure the top of that unit was on a level line with the sink base so the countertop would lie flat and level over them both. We secured that, like the other base cabinets, by screwing through the hanging rail into the wall framing. And after finishing that, we secured the microwave shelf unit under the 12-inch cabinet, clamping that securely before pre-drilling and screwing that in.
Before installing the 7-foot utility cabinet next to the microwave units, we first screwed some blocking into the wall framing. That's the backer for the filler strip we needed to cover the narrow gap between the utility cabinet and the wall, and we couldn't secure it with the cabinet in place. Once that was done, we moved the utility cabinet into position, lined it up, and secured it to the cabinets on the left. Then, after ripping the filler strip to the approximate width, we clamped it to the edge of the cabinet, overlapping equally all along the length, and we scribed the surface to the wall to the outside edge of the strip with a compass set to the width of the overlap. We used a strip of masking tape to protect the surface. Then we used a belt sander to hone the edge down to the scribe line.
Okay, that seems to fit pretty well. Well, now that we have a good fit here, we can pre-drill into the cabinet through the filler strip. We can screw these together and then just nail through the filler strip into our backing material.
These finish nailers come in real handy for delicate pieces like that filler strip and the blocking behind it. But you can also pre-drill and hold it firm with 4-penny finishing nails.
Okay, grab my drill over here.
There you go.
Okay, thanks.
Well, we're moving right along on the island, which we've located 44 inches from the cabinets on both walls. Now that'll give us walkways of 42 inches once the countertops are down. And that's pretty much minimum for a multi-cook kitchen.
That's a high side up here, so we can level that one first. Now, there's a lot of different ways to configure an island like this, depending on the units you're working with. More than likely, you'll end up nailing down some cleats like this or screwing them down to attach the cabinets. Now, what we're working with are 2 18-inch units on either side with a 30-inch opening. This will be used for our slide-in gas range. Now, once we get these all leveled and shim, then we'll just nail through the sides into the cleats to secure them.
With this kind of layout, you first get one of the cabinets leveled in by shimming the bottom. Once it's level on all sides, secure it to the blocking through the toe kick. Then shim the second one so its top is level with the top of the first one.
To finish the back of the island, we used a piece of maple veneered plywood that we finished along the rough edges with leftover filler strip material. We glued that to the backs of the cabinets, clamped it in position, and then drove finish nails to hold it firm. After finishing the island, we installed our big L-shaped countertop, which we'll describe later, but now we'll show you some of the other work we did to finish off the cabinets.
Once the L-shaped countertop was in, we installed our refrigerator compartment, which consisted of 2 7-foot panels we ordered to match the rest of the cabinetry, and a 12-inch high cabinet. We set that in place next to the last base cabinet in that run, clamped the frames together, and secured them.
We then set blocking in place to secure the other panel to the wall. We used a series of 2x4s that we ran flush with the inside of the left panel on the back wall and screwed into the wall studs. Then we nailed through the panel into the end of the blocking to fully secure it. After securing the refrigerator panels, we set the final wall cabinet in position, screwing through the back into the framing and through the inside edge of the refrigerator panel into the cabinet's face frame.
In addition to the cabinets themselves, we also installed matching jambs and casing for the new windows we installed. We put in a lighting shelf over the sink between the 2 wall cabinets. We secured that by pre-drilling and driving screws through the cabinet reveals along the top into the edge of the shelf. Then to finish along the top, we added crown molding, which we also ordered from the cabinet manufacturer in a matching finish.
As an option, we added rolling shelves to the utility cabinet, installing the glides ourselves. Then we reattached all the doors we had removed during construction, securing the hinges to the frames. These are concealed hinges, which is nice because you can order any kind of hardware without having to match the hinge finish. We use jigs to pre-drill the doors and drawers for the hardware. We replaced the standard panels on the dishwasher door with ones we got to match the cabinet door style and finish. And we also ordered maple toe kick material matching the cabinets to finish off the bottoms of the cabinets.
If your cabinets are still in good shape but could stand a cosmetic upgrade, another option is to reface your cabinets. And that's a job that Dean undertook with Suzanne Egley in another HOMETIME kitchen project. Let's take a look.
With a cabinet facelift, you get new doors and hinges, new fronts for the drawers, and new face frame material. Typically it's installed by the same firm providing the materials, but you can do the work yourself, following the basic steps we did. After removing all the old doors and drawers, we started with the end panel on the Peninsula cabinet, gluing in a piece of veneer plywood face frame material over plywood filler we installed to match the depth of the face frame reveal. We used a finish nailer to secure both the veneer plywood and the filler piece to the side of the cabinet. After finishing the end panel, we installed the face frame stiles and rails, ripping them both to the width on the table saw. We applied the stiles first, gluing and finish nailing them as we did on the end panel.
Alright, we finished up the end stiles here for this cabinet. We're ready to move on to the horizontal sections of the face frame. Those are called the rails. I cut the first one here. I actually cut it about a 32nd of an inch long. That's the way the pros do it, to get a really nice, tight fit.
Now this solid wood material is just one option in refacing cabinets. You can also glue on plastic laminate to match a new set of doors. It just depends on the look you're going for.
From there, we use the same technique to finish the rest of the face frames. The new doors come with half-inch single demountable hinges, and they're made in two pieces which detach for easy installation and removal. One piece goes on the frame, and the other goes into a slot the door maker cut into the door. Now, it works best for us to split the top hinge and screw them in separately. But we screwed a full hinge to the bottom of each door. Once the upper hinges were in, we then pushed the plate into the slot on the door to reconnect those and screw in the bottom hinge to finish the door. For the drawers, we had to first knock out the old flush drawer front. But don't go this route if your drawers are already falling apart. Just order new ones. To apply the new drawer front, we secured a piece of plywood backer. We then glued up the back of the drawer front, centered that over the backer piece, and clamped it in place. To secure it, we drove screws through the backer into the new drawer front. We did the other drawers the same way, and then installed new pulls to finish the refacing process.
Well, we're just getting together all of our materials to put together our countertops. Now we're going to be gluing this laminate on the top of 3/4 inch particle board substrate. Now the first thing we're going to be doing is building the particle board to set on top of the cabinets, including our L-shaped corner section, before we start any gluing.
The first step is to measure the cabinets and cut the substrate material to length. We're using particle board that's been pre-cut to a typical countertop width of about 25 inches. If you have to join two pieces of substrate at a corner or on long cabinet runs, first cut a plate from the same substrate material and glue it to the bottom of one piece. Then glue up the other half of the plate, position the second piece over that, and clamp it tight. Then apply your buildup under the edges of the substrate and along the tops of the cabinets. It's generally ripped down from the same 3/4 inch substrate material used for the top. It's usually glued and screwed up through the bottom. Make sure the screws aren't longer than the total thickness or you'll pierce the surface.
Once the substrate's ready, you can cut the laminate to size using a circular saw with a sheet resting on 2x4 supports to keep the blade off the ground. Order sheets large enough to avoid or minimize seams. Cut the pieces about a ½ inch bigger than you need. That leaves enough to route the edges flush with the substrate after gluing, so you don't have to set the laminate exactly perfect. One exception is along a seam, where you ideally use factory edges for the tightest fits. We use the laminate itself to cover the edges, which is called self-edging, and it's easiest to cut those with a table saw.
Contact cement is the glue generally used to secure the laminate. Do the edging first, brushing the glue on both the substrate and the back of the laminate. Be sure to cover both surfaces thoroughly. Then let the glue set until it's tacky, which means you can touch it without it sticking to your skin. That takes a ½ hour or more depending on the humidity. Once the glue's tacky, you can apply the edging, but you have to be careful since the glued surfaces will stick together solidly once they touch and you won't be able to get them apart. So it works best to first line up the edging a couple inches out from the substrate, apply it first on one end, and then work your way down to the other end. To make sure the surfaces fully adhere, you should also press them firmly together all along the edge. A laminate roller is the best tool for that.
When the glue's dry, you can trim the edge of the laminate down flush with the edge of the substrate. The best tool for this is a router with a laminate or flush trim bit. Then file the edge to minimize snagging and chipping down the road. Once the edging's trimmed, you can start applying glue to the top of the substrate and the back of the countertop laminate. Brushing takes a while, but you can get a special napless roller to help spread the glue more quickly.
In the center here. Now the idea is to, we don't want this laminate to immediately adhere to the particle board, so what we've done is laid down these vinyl strips. This way we can set the laminate down on top of the vinyl strips in more of a controlled fashion, get it positioned exactly where we want it, and then one by one we'll pull out the vinyl strips and make contact much more slowly than trying to do it in one fell swoop. Okay.
Gotta come this way a little more.
Okay.
There we
About
go.
there.
And you want to make sure that the glue is set properly, otherwise these slats are going to stick. Good luck getting those out.
Okay, how are we looking on the seam down there?
Okay, I'm going to have to get this on the line. It's going to have to come back your way a little. There we go.
Yeah, looks pretty good. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll start sliding the slats out in the center first, and then we'll just work our way out to either side. Now when you're doing this, make sure that you cut the laminate large enough so you have some leeway on exactly where you're going to position this. Now once we get our second piece on, we'll just trim off all the excess with a router.
And then we want to use a laminate roller to make sure that the surfaces are bonding 100%.
If you're applying the top in two pieces like us, set the second piece down next to the first one, making sure the edge of the seam is tight to the edge of the first piece and pressing that down into the glue. Then lay down the rest of the piece and roll the glued surfaces tightly together. After the top's dry, you can trim off the edges flush with the substrate.
Well, we've got the top glued and trimmed and ready to set into its final position. Now it's going to be really tight between the corner and the utility cabinet, so we're going to have to put the shorter end in at an angle and then jockey it into position. You all set?
Yep, okay. Let me lift up this end before you push.
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
A little bit higher.
How's it going?
There we go.
Making it?
Yep. Okay, let me see what this
Okay,
is.
it's in the corner.
Okay, this seems to be cleaning all right. Nice. Now originally we cut the substrate to match the wall, so it's a matter of trimming the laminate to match the substrate. There are a few gaps along the back wall here, but our backsplash should cover up that no problem. Actually, this is looking pretty good around here. There's a bit of a gap there. Okay.
To secure the top from below, we screw up through the cabinet's corner blocks into the particle board.
A laminate backsplash will often be secured directly to the top, so it can be scribed to the wall and sanded to fit. But that's tough on a top this size, so we kept ours separate. and used 1/2-inch particle board so it can flex and conform to the wall without scribing. You can secure a backsplash like this with silicone caulk, spread liberally along the back of the material. Then set it in place, pressing it to the wall to secure it. Since the caulk's the only thing holding the backsplash, we set up a bracing system to hold it firmly in place. We're wedging shims between the bottoms of the cabinets and the top of the backsplash to hold it down against the countertop. And to hold it against the wall, we shim between the backsplash and the blocking we clamp down along the front of the countertop. Then we put in the backsplash along the other wall following the same steps.
For the island, we wanted 2 edges of the countertop to extend 15 inches beyond the tops of the cabinets, and we're using brackets for extra support. For the substrate, we screwed 2 full layers of 3/4-inch particle board together, rounded off the corners, and cut an opening for the slide-in range to match the opening between the cabinets.
After cutting the laminate, we again applied the edging first, but we brought in a heat gun to help wrap the laminate around the rounded corners. After finishing off the edging, we laid down the vinyl strips and set down the laminate for the top, paying special attention to the cutout for the range. Then we pulled out the strips, secured the laminate to the substrate, and used the roller to fully adhere the glued surfaces and finish the edges. To secure the top of the island, we screwed up through the hardware on the brackets into the bottom of the substrate. And to finish the countertops, we caulked along any seams or edges where we wanted to keep moisture out.
Oh, we'll talk about other kitchen floors in a moment, like vinyl, tile, and wood, but first we want to show you how this plastic laminate goes down. These planks are tongue and groove. They're 8 inches wide, 48 inches long, and they're 1/4 inch thick. Now they've got a wood-based core, so it is recommended that it's on site 48 hours prior to installation to acclimate it.
To begin, we snapped a chalk guideline for the first course parallel to our longest wall.
We used a table saw to rip the first course down a couple inches to accommodate the openings, but you could also use a circular saw as well. Keep the finished side up using a hand saw or table saw, but down with a circular saw.
We also cut out the bottom of the casing at each opening using a plank as a guide to make sure they fit under the casing. And we cut a piece of transition molding to fit this opening and blend the laminate with the carpet.
And you install them as a floating floor, which means they don't get nailed or glued in place. That's to allow for expansion and contraction. But you do put down this layer of foam as an underlayment. Now this doesn't get stapled or glued down either, you just leave it loose. And they recommend that you lay down one width at a time, put down the planks over this, and then go on to the next width and cover that with flooring.
We install the first few pieces in the corner. Now we're using these 1/4 inch spacers that they provided with the kit. This will create our 1/4 inch expansion gap all the way around the floor. Of course, our base trim will cover that up once that goes on. Now we will end up gluing all the grooves when the time comes, but right now we're just taking the first couple of rows and doing a dry run here to make sure that everything fits in just the way it should. Slide this one in here.
The first course is pretty long since we're extending the floor all the way down this hall. I'm going to snug up the last piece. There we go. We need to use this pull bar that comes with the kit by putting one end over the plank and then tapping the other end to tighten up the end joints.
Now we'll use the cutoff from the first row to start our second row. This way we don't have to worry about our seams lining up. Everything will stay nice and staggered. You can see that this is a seam from the first row, and this is where our second row will be starting. Now if this is less than 8 inches here, we'll have to cut this board again, either cut it in half or in 1/4 or 1/3, whichever will give you the best usage of the material. Now whenever you're working with tongue and groove material, you never want to hit the actual flooring with a hammer. Instead you want to use a pull bar for the edges and then a tool like this that they included with the kit to snug up everything.
Well, you'll find that the planks are usually straight and square to each other, and that you can usually adjust them to cover any minor variations. But if you're off at this stage, then go back and scribe the wall to the edge of the first course before you start gluing. And we're looking good here.
Now, once you get the first 2 or 3 rows running straight, then it's time to glue. Now, when you start, they recommend that you glue the first 2 pieces of the first 2 rows together. That gets the first 2 rows nice and secure. Now, they also recommend is that the glue gets applied only to the groove side of the flooring. You want to make sure that you get enough glue in the groove so that there are no voids that moisture gets in and warps the flooring. That should do it pretty well, just like that.
Make sure the planks go in tight at the seams and wipe off the excess glue. Now we just continue gluing the planks, working our way out from the starting point till it's time to roll out more foam.
Okay, here's the first piece to the next row.
Okay, great. Well, we have the first 4 rows all glued up. Everything's going fine from that standpoint. But the next piece will go off for the foam, so it's time to lay down some more. Now, when we do this, we want the next row to just butt up against the first row. We don't want it to overlap. If it does that, we're going to end up with a lump in the floor.
That gives you the basic sequence for installing a laminate floor. We repeated those steps as we moved across the main part of the kitchen, cutting and fitting the planks as needed around the island and the cabinets.
We've been working on the floor most of the day now. The last section that goes in goes right up against the wall, and this section we have to cut. Now, the way we'll be doing this is by taking a full section like this. We lay this right up against the edge of the last pieces that we put in. And then to determine where we have to cut this along the edge, we'll take a scrap piece, again the same width as this piece, lay it up against the wall, and using a pencil, we'll scribe the cut along the piece that we'll be cutting. Of course, this area we'll take out, and this board should fit in there just the right width. The tongue along the edge of this should serve as the expansion joint up against the wall.
Well, once the planks for the last course are ripped, you can go ahead and glue up the groove and set it in place. Now, we don't have a whole lot of leeway here, but if you go in at an angle, you should be able to lay it flat without any problem.
Here's your next one.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Then we just want to get everything all snugged up and get our spacers in here. Now, they recommend that you let the floor sit at least 12 hours before you pull your spacers and start to use the floor.
Once the flooring was dry, we put a new base molding which covered the gaps along the walls. We nailed it to the framing though, not to the planks since they have to float. And that gives you the basic steps for installing laminate floors.
Sheet vinyl is one of the most common do-it-yourself kitchen floors, but it requires a smooth surface. So oftentimes people have to first secure a new plywood underlayment, as Dean and Joanne Liebler did on this kitchen project.
If you're installing sheet vinyl, you first create a template out of heavy paper matching your floor surface to serve as a cutting guide for the vinyl. You lay the template out over the vinyl and cut the vinyl to match with a utility knife, leaving an overlap if you need to make a seam. Once the vinyl's cut, lay it out on the floor in its proper position and make sure it fits. For a full spread adhesive application, roll back half the sheet, apply the glue to the floor, and lay the vinyl in that. Then do the second half after that.
Right.
If there's a seam, leave about 6 inches unglued on either side of it. Cut the two pieces along a straight line where they overlap, peel the edges back, spread the glue, and press the edges down to secure them. For a perimeter bond application, you glue the seam down first using basically the same steps. But then you can just staple down the edges, making sure the staples are close to the edge where they'll be covered later by base molding. Use adhesive wherever the stapler can't reach, like under cabinets.
For ceramic tile floors, the best do-it-yourself underlayment is a layer of concrete backer board, which resists moisture damage to stay firm and solid under the tile. You can either nail or screw it down to the subfloor and joists and seal the joints with mesh tape and mortar. Determine the best layout before setting the tile by finding the center point and test fitting a few rows. Try to leave full tiles in the most visible areas and avoid rows with less than half a tile by shifting the layout a half tile one way or the other. Floor tiles usually set in thin-set mortar. Spread one small section at a time, usually 4 to 8 square feet. Leave space between for grout, typically an 1/8 inch to 3/8 of an inch depending on the tile size and style. Set your full tiles first to establish the layout. Then measure, cut, and set the tiles that have to be fit in place. Let the finished tile dry for 24 hours before applying the grout, which is basically a colored mortar that you can buy pre-mixed or mix yourself. Spread it out thick, embed it in the joints, scrape away the excess, and wipe away any residue with a damp sponge.
Wood floors are gaining popularity in kitchens with improved stains and finishes for unfinished wood flooring and with the availability of pre-finished wood flooring as well. In another project, we installed a pre-finished tongue and groove oak flooring with a special floor nailer. The main consideration is keeping the joints straight by using guidelines square to the room, not to the wall, which would bow in or out. We started with the tongue out. That way you can nail through the tongues on one row and cover the nails with the grooves from the next row. And we nailed them down right over rosin paper to prevent squeaking later on.
Well, the flooring is all set, and we've covered it with rosin paper to protect it during the final stages of work here. Now we're ready to put in the new sink, disposer, dishwasher, and refrigerator, which all require plumbing of some sort, so we usually put those in together.
Now we'll get to the plumbing in just a second, but first we want to bring up to speed on some of the electrical we've done here since we finished the floor. All the GFI switches are in, so now we can hook up our appliances. Now the dishwasher and disposer, those are all dedicated circuits. Now the dishwasher is hot, whereas the disposer, once we plug that in, it'll be operated by the switch up here.
To set that up, we ran the power first through this box and then down to the receptacle. So adding the switch gives it control over the circuit. Most of the receptacles we put in were normal 20 amp devices, like this one for the refrigerator, and that includes the dishwasher and the disposer outlets. But most codes now require GFCI protection on all countertop outlets. So we installed GFCI devices at the start of our countertop circuits and ran the other devices off those to give each of them the same GFCI protection.
With that work done, the next step is determining where to cut the opening for the sink. Now, the size and position are going to vary depending upon the size and style of the sink that you're installing. Sometimes the manufacturer includes a paper template that you can tape down and trace over, but most often you're going to be working off a set of measurements that are included in the sink instructions.
To center the sink on a window, use a framing square to transfer the center of the window to the countertop. Then measure half of the width of the opening in each direction and mark lines representing the sides of the opening. After that, measure and mark lines for the front and back edges as well, making sure they do not run right over the cabinet frame or you might cut into it. You can mark off rounded corners with a compass if the radius is given. Just measure out the radius on each side from the corner and mark an arc from each point with the compass set to the radius. Where the arcs cross is the center point of the radius for that corner, so you can set the compass there to draw in your rounded corner.
To cut the opening, you can plunge cut with a circular saw, which means starting the saw, dropping it straight down to penetrate the surface, and then cutting forward. It works on all straight cuts, but watch out for binding. After cutting the sides, it's a good idea to screw a plank down into the cutout, which is otherwise hard to handle as you finish cutting. Then use a jigsaw to finish the corners. The plank holds the cutout in place as you finish the cuts, and you can just pull the whole thing out when you're done.
It's easiest to install shut-off valves before the sink goes in. These connect with compression fittings over the copper pipes. We ended up with 4 after splitting the hot water line for the sink and dishwasher and the cold water line for the sink and ice maker.
It's also simpler to attach the faucet and supply lines now to limit the work down on the cabinet. This model has a pull-out sprayer which requires only one hole in the sink, but other faucets require 2 or 3 holes on 4 or 8-inch centers, so make sure your sink jives with your faucet. Assembly varies by model and brand, so be sure to follow the instructions as you assemble it.
Well, next thing we'll be doing is putting the sink in the opening. So I'm putting a couple beads of silicone caulk around the outside to seal the rim to the countertop. Now, one thing that did happen is when I was cutting this opening, is the saw kind of kicked back just a little bit and took out part of the top. It didn't cut all the way down, but just along the surface. I'm hoping that the rim of the sink will cover up this little portion here. Hopefully it will.
Well, we usually secure the sink drain before setting the sink in place, but not this time. This unit's pretty heavy. It's cast iron with an enamel finish, and leaving the strainers out allows us to get a better grip. I'm all set with this.
Okay, the caulk's all ready, so I'll grab this end. Here we go.
Ready? Yep. Whoop, we're taking that with, that's all right.
Okay, let me grab a hold of the drain here.
All right.
Okay. Okay, let's lift it up there, Robin.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, go ahead and set your end down.
All right. Okay. Oh, that looks good. Here, let me measure it. Okay, just come back a little bit. Oh yeah, that's good right there. It covers up your mistake. Now you want to make sure that the sink is centered properly, not only so it'll look good, but also so it's supported equally on each side, especially when the sink is this heavy.
I will also be putting a bead of caulk around the outside here just for a little added protection. But because we're going to be working on the sink here a little bit, and for fear of smearing that, we'll just let that go for a while. Right now I want to hook up the supply lines down here. Now usually you hook these up before, if I get this tape off my fingers, usually you hook these up before you do the trap, otherwise the trap just gets in the way. And realize there's a lot of different sizes and types of supply lines, so you want to make sure you know what you're dealing with before you buy anything. Now these are a threaded fitting.
For a kitchen drain, you generally end up with something that looks like this. You've got the sink drain with the tailpiece coming down from the sink, a special fitting for the dishwasher drain. This is for the disposer with a T-fitting going down to the trap assembly required on every drain. That goes to the stub out, which we held off gluing until after the cabinet's in. And we'll probably end up cutting some of this, but we won't know until after we fit it.
The drain assembly starts with the strainer, which gets a ring of plumber's putty under the rim to seal it up. Set that down in the drain outlet and press down firmly to seat it in the putty. It's secured with a lock nut screwed on from below.
If you're installing a garbage disposer, it will come with its own drain flange, and you can set it in with a ring of plumber's putty. You secure it with a snap ring that locks the disposer mounting assembly on the flange from below, and you turn the mounting screws to tighten it against the sink and seal the flange. Be sure to trim away any excess putty. Before hanging the disposer, you'll need to attach a power cord, which is usually sold separately.
Now it's a fairly straightforward connection. The hard part is just getting this adapter ring up there so everything hooks up. There we go. Oop, I just about had it. I did. It's a little bit of trial and error. So you have to one part down and then get the other one up there. There we go. Okay, get this thing positioned correctly and crank it down. There we go.
With the disposer in, you can screw on the drain tailpiece and start assembling the drain pieces. In our case, we wanted the tailpiece and the disposer drain roughly the same height, and we measured between the two to determine lengths for the pieces needed to merge the drains. You can cut those to size with a hacksaw or a power miter saw. After cutting the pieces, the drain's ready for assembly, but we first had to glue in the angled stub out we saved to get the cabinet in. Then we put in the pieces connecting the sink and disposer drains. We attached the drain arm to the stub out in the wall. And finally, we connected the trap that completed the drain. Leave the fittings loose at first so you can jostle the pieces to make the best fit, but then tighten them all securely to seal the joints.
With the drain assembled, we drilled the holes we needed in the cabinets to run a dishwasher supply line and drain hose. We also drilled a hole through the refrigerator panel for the ice maker supply line. And for convenience, we ran the ice maker supply before putting in the dishwasher. We use plastic tubing, which works like copper, but you do need to insert a metal sleeve into the tube to keep the plastic rigid in the fitting. There's a couple of things to do before installing a dishwasher, like attaching the drain hose. It usually connects in front behind an access panel. The hose typically slips over a nipple and you secure it with a hose clamp. For the hot water supply, we use flexible copper tubing, curved to first run down the left side of the opening and then along the back of the opening into the sink cabinet. It gets connected later on. We also attach the power cord, which usually does not come with a unit, but they're available at home centers and hardware stores.
Oh, wait a minute, let me see.
Yeah,
let me put this in first because this is kind of difficult.
Now, the plug and the drain on these aren't that long, so it takes a little bit of coordination. I want to snake the drain through the cabinet over there, and then once we get the electrical plugged in, I can start sliding this in there. I have to do it fairly slow, though, because you don't want to crimp the drain line. You have to, again, coordinate the whole operation so you hold the drain tube on as you slide in. Once we get it in position here, then all we have to do is level the legs and make sure everything's all set. Okay.
Once the unit's in position, turn the feet under the front corners to raise the unit up to the bottom of the countertop. Then screw up through the brackets into the countertop to secure it. Make sure the screws are not long enough to pierce the top. The dishwasher drain hose attaches to the fitting on the sink's tailpiece, and to prevent backups, you always loop the hose up into the top of the cabinet and secure it to the side with a plastic staple. A hose clamp secures the end to the tailpiece. The dishwasher supply line usually attaches to the unit with a compression fitting, and the other end of that line goes into the hot water shutoff valve with another compression fitting to wrap up the dishwasher installation.
Before pushing the refrigerator into place, you have to connect the ice maker tubing to a fitting usually accessed through a panel and back. By the way, with plastic tubing, it's a good idea to secure it against the back wall with plastic staples to minimize the chance of crimping when you push the unit into position, but always leave a few feet of slack for pushing it in and out. On this unit, a compression fitting connects the tubing to the hose fitting, and that screws on over the refrigerator valve. We connect it loosely at first and then tighten it up with wrenches. By the way, always turn the water on and check for any leaks before you push the unit back up against the wall, or you might leave a big wet mess back there.
That's good.
Let's see, over there just ever so slightly. All right.
Good.
That's looking real good. Okay, let's see. How are we doing?
I got a little bit of space over here.
All right. Well, this morning, we're going to finish up the lighting in the kitchen. Now, we're using quite a few different types. We have pendant lights, recessed, under cabinet, and low voltage. Now, usually the lighting is about the last thing you end up doing in a kitchen project. Of course, a rough-in happens much earlier.
This time, we held off till the cabinets and the crown molding were in. That way, we could cut the holes exactly where we needed them in relation to the cabinet, which is pretty hard to do before the cabinets go in. To power those, we simply rerouted the cable from the old ceiling fixture to the closest recess fixture and ran the others in series from that.
The recessed fixtures each had their own metal box for connecting the cables, and they're typically secured to the ceiling joists. But when you don't have access to the framing, you can get retrofit fixtures like these, which simply clip to the drywall.
To switch the hanging lights separately from the recessed lights, we put them on a separate cable controlled by a new switch. To make that a three-way switch, we ran a cable from there to a switch box on the opposite wall. For that, you need special three-way switches with a third terminal for securing the extra wire we ran and working together to power the same set of lights. For the lights themselves, we pushed the cable through new fixture boxes that we positioned over the island and secured to blocking between the joists up above the drywall.
There we go. Like that. And we used to have just one overhead light in this area, but we're replacing that with a nice mix of general lighting from these recessed lights and task lighting over the island with those hanging fixtures, and then fluorescence under the cabinet where it gets kind of dark.
Most flush-mounted ceiling fixtures get attached basically the same way. there's a mounting bar that gets screwed into the electrical box, and then some type of threaded nipple that will go through the center here that attaches the fixture tight up against the ceiling. Of course, there are variations on that, and the pendants we're installing are one of those variations. Now, this particular pendant has a canopy that will be attached to 2 screws coming out of this mounting bracket. And so we'll put that up like so. And then it also has a self-tightening screw that will connect the cord real tight to the canopy. First, get these wires hooked up. If you've ever done this, make sure the power's off. That's a given. Then connect the wires of the same color from the box and the fixture by twisting the ends together clockwise and screwing on a wire nut, which usually comes with the fixture.
Okay. Now with 3 in a row, you want them all the same height above the island. So we set the middle one in first and then line the other 2 up based on that. Typically, you want the bottom of the shade 5.5 feet above the floor or 30 inches down from the ceiling, which is what we're going by.
Now, this particular unit has a little screw attachment here to make adjustments on your line. You simply loosen it, move the canopy up and down, and then tighten it back down, and you're all set. Robin, could you hold this up while I
Sure.
get this up here?
Right.
Move this around here. Slide that right into position.
For the under cabinet lights, installation will vary depending on the type of lighting, but generally, you first secure the back of the light to the bottom of the cabinet. Then you connect the fixture power and neutral leads to the corresponding wires in the power cable. This light's nice because you can hang the fixture on the back of the light while making the connections. Once the wires are connected, you screw that part of the light into the back to secure it under the cabinet. Then you can set the bulbs in and snap the cover over the bulbs.
For the low voltage lighting over the sink, we first drilled up through the light shelf. Then we set the lights in the holes. They're sometimes known as hockey pucks since that's what they look like. We secured the pucks by screwing up into the light shelf, and we hid the screws with a ring that snapped on over the rim. We then plugged the leads from each of the pucks into an adapter that splits the power coming off the low voltage transformer, which we connected to a 110 volt cable.
Okay, that ought to work pretty well.
That should do it. Well, it's been a couple days since we finished up our lighting. We had the electrician already checked out some of the things we did. He also ordered up the inspection. Everything's been approved. And so now that we're basically done, we thought we'd point out a few highlights of the finished details.
Yeah, like the microwave, which has always been one of my favorite installations. You just plug it in and set it in place.
Get it out there.
Okay, and once the lights were in, the electrician hooked up the new lighting and the appliance circuits back at the service panel. So those are all working now.
Now, one of the circuits snakes through this island here and powers all the outlets. That was a pretty interesting rough-in.
That's because the only way to run wire to an island is up through the floor, so we had to drill down through the cabinet and the floor. Then we ran cable up from the service panel, through the floor, into a junction box secured to the bottom of the cabinet. And we ran cables from that box to power receptacles for the island countertop and the gas range. And after all the cables were run and connected, our electrician came back and connected all the new circuits at the service panel.
Now, when you're wiring an island like this, it's a good idea to use shallow metal boxes. You can see we've cut these into the side of the cabinet. They're not particularly attractive, but by using a shallow box, we're able to still get our drawers past here and slide in and out very, very efficiently. Now, you can't use non-metallic sheathed cable inside a cabinet like this when it's open. Instead, you have to run all your wires through conduit. We've done that. Again, hooked them up to our metal boxes. Now, the drafting for this oven is downdraft. So you can see we've also cut that into the cabinet. Again, not real attractive, but it's something you have to do in this type of situation.
The vent runs from the range through the cabinet and down to the basement where we ran it outside through the rim joist. The final connection took us under the range where we reached back to connect the end of the ductwork. Then the plumber ran the new gas line and hooked that up for us.
Well, hopefully this gives you a real good idea of the steps involved in kitchen remodeling. Now, you might be wondering a little bit about the time frame. If you're working on a project like this pretty much full-time, count on 4 to 6 weeks. But if, like most do-it-yourselfers, you're working primarily on the weekends and evenings, plan on spending a little bit more time.
But if you're like us, time will go just like that. For Home Time, I'm Robin Hartle.
And I'm Dean Johnson. Thanks for watching.
Home Time is made possible by Chevy full-size pickup, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickup on the road. The The National PBS series HOMETIME is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley has been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right.